Today, we're really going to focus on what, like the name of the course implies, analytics through searching, which is going to be based on some techniques and features to help you sift through the mountains of data that you'll find in these document intensive cases that you'll be using next point 4. And the way that I like to structure this out is kind of a way that you can go about using search pre-review, during the review process, and post-review. So that's kind of how we're going to break up today's session. And the reason I like to teach it this way is breaking it up into these 3 different stages of the review process is so that you can really get a good idea of all of the different ways you can go about using searches within NextPoint and why you would go about using different features. I want to make sure that we are being strategic about how we go about running searches. We're not just running searches for the fun of them. And so that we can kind of identify what it is that we're looking for as quickly as possible. I know that sometimes it can feel like you're searching for a needle in a haystack, but that's really why we've designed these courses, is to kind of help with that feeling. So let's start off with the pre-review stage that I was talking about. And as you can see here, that we are on this training database, and I'm in the discovery database, beginning on the analytics page, which we've briefly touched on, where before I just kind of told you that the analytics page is just a high-level visual overview of all of the documents that have been imported into a database. So you can see that we have imported 4,301 total documents. We can see how many of those documents are emails, how many attachments there are to those emails, and then how many unique individual email threads we have in this database. One of the things that I think is important to point out when it comes to the analytics tab is that everything on this page is going to be dynamic and clickable. So I could go ahead and click into, if I wanted to just jump right into emails, it will take me to only documents that are emails. And we can see so based on if we recall, the grid view, where every row represents a unique individual document and every column represents its own metadata. It's the metadata that is associated with that document. We can see here from these little icons that these are all emails. Here's an email with an attachment, email attachment. And one of the things that I want to point out is once we clicked in here, it builds out the search syntax for you organically as you're navigating through the app, which is one of the cool things that I want to point out. And as you're playing around in the app, whether you're running your own searches or clicking around, I always recommend taking a look up here in the search bar, which is going to be searching across your entire database, and seeing what is it that I have in my results and what is it this pulling. And so you'll be able to, this might look somewhat like you understand what it is. Maybe this doesn't make any sense to you at all. But the goal of this training is that I'm going to have you guys be able to understand what this search syntax is saying and what you should expect as results. But what this is saying is we're looking at any document types being emails or any file extension being MSG or EML, which is going to capture any emails that have been attached to other emails. So we'll go into this, we'll come back to this, and you'll be able to see what this means a little bit more, but just wanted to show you that on the analytics tab, you can kind of click into anything that you would like. So underneath here, we have this date range, and this is a helpful tool that you can go about leveraging. So let's go ahead and say, I update this from 2000 to 2030, which has not yet happened, but I can see that the vast majority of my data comes between 2000 and 2002. So I can customize this and say, let's go to 2002. So beginning of 2000 to the end of 2002. Maybe I want to customize it to months instead of years. I can do so. And this can be very helpful for identifying documents that are within a specific date range that you should be looking at. Let's say that October of 2001 this is a point where like the event that transpired that this case surrounds maybe took place in October of 2001. And the judge says we should be focusing on communications that took place 2 months prior to 2 months after this event took place. Again, everything's dynamic and clickable. I hover over these, it shows me how many documents there are for those months. I can click into October of 2001. And again, it builds out that search syntax for me, saying that the document date is a range between the beginning of October to the end of October, the range being denoted by these brackets. We'll run a couple of range searches as we start to build out our own searches. But you can see those 613 documents are now showing up here for us to go ahead and review. But if I wanted to take this, and again, you can see that we've got the 2nd, the 23rd, we could go ahead and organize these documents by their document date range, going from the 1st or reverse chronologically from the 31st, if you just click on the metadata header. But if I wanted to customize this, like the judge had said, that we should be looking at documents 2 months before and 2 months after, I can go ahead and edit this syntax up here and say, let's go 2 months prior, which is August, beginning of August, through the end of December, 2 months after. And then instead of those 600 documents, we now have 1,493. And so maybe at this point, I would want to take all of these documents. And if you recall how to bulk action, we can go ahead and click on this and add them all to a single folder. Again, we're tagging them to a folder. We're not making any changes to the documents themselves, which would be done right here if you wanted to do it via bulk action. But you could create a new folder and say, let's name it document date range scope, and include any email families, so that if there were any attachments to those emails that were sent on August 1st that were created prior to August 1st. So an example would be like an email with an attachment, an email that was sent August 1st with an attachment being a PowerPoint or a Word document that was created maybe a couple of weeks prior. That document might not show up here in this search syntax because the document date was not falling within this range, but we still want to include it in that review process because it was part of that communication. So we would include the email family, and then we could go ahead and say, let's go ahead and order these chronologically and group those families together within this folder. So when you're reviewing them, it's a little bit more, it's a chronological process as you go through there, and you have those families grouped together as well. And then when you hit update, it will tag those documents to that folder that you know, when I'm going through, I'm reviewing these documents fall within the range of what I should be looking for, which is really what, I'm not going to go ahead and update this, but wanted to show you how you could do it. That's really what the process of the pre-review is all about, is kind of setting yourself up so that you're not just looking at going through and reviewing all of the documents, just being a bit more hyper-targeted in what it is that you're looking for, so that you can organize yourself and say, I've created folders for these specific reasons or for these specific search terms. And you know that what you're looking at pertains to a specific issue, and you know what you're looking for a little bit more targeted as you go through the review. You can also use the date range feature to identify documents that are not within your date range that you should be looking at, and can maybe then say these documents are not responsive for whatever reason. Underneath the date range, I wanted to show you, we have this, what we call metrics or widgets. And these are, you can see the one that comes by default is file extension, just shows us what we have in our database. We have a lot of emails, EMLs, text files, Word documents, Excels, and you could go ahead, just like anything else dynamic and clickable, you could click in and say, let me just see the Word documents. And there you have them. But I like the ability to be able to customize this with different metadata fields. So here's one file extension that comes by default. You can always remove it if you want. But if I wanted to add a different one, I simply click on this plus to find a different metric or that I want to use. And let's go with document author. Actually, real quick, we'll come back to document author. Let's go with domain first. The reason I like using domain as an example is because let's assume that gmail.com, I know that that's a very standard one, but or let's go with houstonrr.com because that's a little bit more specific. Let's say that that was your firm name's domain name. You might be interested in clicking into these documents and taking all of these documents, bulk action, and creating a folder that says review for attorney-client privilege, because in all likelihood, these are communications that were collected between your client and yourself. And so you might want to look at these documents specifically for attorney-client privilege so that they're not produced incorrectly. And so we would say, let's take any documents that are part of this email family. Let's take the correspondence back and forth, these email chains, and hit update and tag them to this folder that we are specifically going to review for attorney-client privilege. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the analytics page. You can also use it just like with the date range to find things that are maybe not as important. So if I clicked into see all, you'd be able to see all of the different domain names that it comes with. And so if you saw any domains from like pizzahut.com, you probably don't need to know their pizza ordering habits for this case. But if you were to have collected my Gmail account, you'd probably see way too many pepperoni stuffed crust pizzas from Pizza Hut. But you could go ahead and mark those documents in one fell swoop and say these documents via bulk action are not responsive, unless your case has something to do with Pizza Hut versus Domino's or something like that. So let's go back, add another one by clicking on that plus sign. And let's go ahead and do that document author. This can be helpful for identifying key individuals in a case. And perhaps you want to create a folder for that specific individual. So let's say Shawnee Daniel is an important person in this case. I could go ahead, click into them, and create a folder and bulk action, add a folder for that specific individual, tag it to Shawnee Daniel, and tag any documents that maybe Shawnee Daniel was the author of, maybe any documents that they were on an email thread with, that they were in communications. So you might want to run multiple searches to identify documents that pertain to a specific individual, and then tag them to those folders. One of the things to note here is a lot of times you'll have, depending on where this information was collected from, you could have different usernames for the same person. And that's something to keep an eye on as you go through this. So maybe Philip Polsky and P. Philly are the same person. So just something to keep an eye on and be aware of as you're using these metrics or widgets to identify documents or searches that you're creating. So it's as easy as adding them by clicking plus and choosing, or you can remove them. These are all personalized to the user. And then right below here, we've got the your discovery status. And this shows how far along you are in reviewing all of the documents in your database for relevancy and for privilege status. Again, everything is dynamic and clickable. So I could go ahead and if I wanted to hop right into the documents that have not yet been reviewed for relevancy, I could click into this part of the donut chart, or I could click in here and it will take me to those documents that have not yet been reviewed, and I could start going through them. Again, this is probably not the best way to go about doing it, just because it's not as hyper targeted of a view, but I just wanted to show you what that looked like. And I'm going to go ahead, and the last thing I want to show you for this analytics tab is I want to show you how you can use this to not only look at a visual overview of all of the documents in this database, but perhaps you want to get a visual overview of a subset of documents. You could go ahead and take any search syntax that you want. So let's say I'm looking for any documents that contain the word contract, either in the searchable text or within the metadata, we can see that there are 216 documents total within this database that hit on the word contract. 50 of them from the domain enron.com. So maybe you click in there and we can see that it builds out that search syntax, domain being enron.com and the word contract. And maybe we want to look at those specific. I'm going to copy that search syntax and then come back here and see that it's all 50 of these documents are from our emails. There are 0 attachments to them. It makes sense because we had the domain being enron.com. And you can see that the vast majority of them come from 2001. Some come from 2002.